心配することなんかなんもねえ。みんな前だけ見てけよ。背中は俺が守ってやるぜ。
The end of Haikyuu's adventures in the Nationals arc brought a wave of excitement and anxiety for the vast majority of fans following the series. Such a bold decision to implement a large time skip, and such a departure from the comfortable foundations established, understandably left many feeling a bit apprehensive about where the series was headed for this final stretch. However, after the initial shock wore off, widespread trepidation was quickly replaced with anticipation and enthusiasm, as fans waited with bated breath to see what their favorite characters were up to post-time skip. Years and years after Karasuno's heartbreaking loss at Nationals, the cast we had grown to know and love had grown up themselves, and it was really cool and interesting to see what had become of their lives. But there were a handful of characters that Furudate withheld for a good number of chapters, as they slowly revealed these things, with arguably the most notable among them being our lovable guardian deity. In the weeks leading up to his first post-time skip appearance, the vast majority of fans, myself included, predicted that Nishinoya would without doubt become a pro, and that it was just a matter of which team he would be on, and how high the hierarchy of world superstars he had climbed by this point in his life. After all, he's consistently acknowledged to be a prodigy that backs up his instinctual talent with tons of hard work. He's one of the best players we see, and it felt like a no-brainer that he'd progress his brilliant high school career further and pursue the world stage of volleyball. It just seemed natural, since he loved it and was so adeptly good at it. So imagine the surprise when Nishinoya appeared on the color page of chapter 386, wrestling with a marlin in the waters of Italy, and when it was stated in no uncertain terms that he was simply traveling the world and experiencing all that there was to experience, instead of pursuing a career in sport. It seems like a move totally out of the blue at first, and though it is understandable that this story decision may be initially disappointing for some, I personally found it to be one of the series' greatest strokes of genius. Speaking personally, I've always really liked Noya. I thought he was a good character, admirable due to his endearing personality, his insane skill, his badass moments, and the way he supported his teammates so well. But he was always someone that was incredibly easy for me to really like, yet kind of hard for me to totally love and consider really well written. However, the release of this chapter put it all together for me, and truly made him a special character in my eyes, and I think Furudate's decision with what to do with Nishinoya was absolutely terrific. Firstly, with regards to his life choices, it really isn't difficult to see why it's all perfectly consistent and makes sense. Throughout the story, he's always been an independent thinking, very free spirit, so it totally fits his personality to want to go off on these adventures and discover new horizons for himself. And in terms of not continuing with volleyball, just as the series explores the idea of our passions sometimes not aligning with what we're naturally good at through displaying characters who desperately wish that they had as much aptitude as they had love for the game, Nishinoya is the other side of the coin. Just because he's a volleyball prodigy doesn't mean that that's what he wanted to do with his career. It's as simple as that. While he did undoubtedly love volleyball, and while many in-universe and out envisioned his future neatly laid out in front of him, we need not be chained down to any given path just because that is what people assume of us. Sometimes our truest passions lie outside our talents. For Nishinoya, volleyball was just a stop on the series of experiences that was his life. An extremely important stop, don't get me wrong, perhaps the most impactful one, but it was a stop nonetheless. An experience to look back on and take fulfillment from in the moment, but nothing more than that. And that's okay, because what he sought from volleyball had less to do with personal achievements and progression, and even the team winning, and more to do with all of the byproducts of those things. And that is a key distinction that makes all the difference for this character.
これからこのチームはなんかこういい感じにやっていくんだと思います。俺もここで練習したい。けど 俺も試合に出てこのチームで勝ったら朝日さんいなくても勝てるって証明になるみたいで嫌です。今まで一緒に戦ってきたのにわがまま言ってすみません。
Early on in the series, it's established very clearly that Noya was willing to stop playing volleyball simply because it didn't feel right to be on a team that was doing well without Asahi. He wanted to experience these things together. He didn't desire success if it came in the absence of his dear friend, because that would taint his experience, and he didn't want that, and as such, he was willing to forego the sport entirely. He has a hunger, but it is not for volleyball. It's for what volleyball means to him. This clearly isn't the type of person who has a Hinata-like thirst for the sport. It just isn't the philosophy of someone who would try to remain on the court no matter what. It's that of a guy who was gifted at it and loved it, but primarily because of what it meant to be a team. And to help out the team, he was consistently humble and hard on himself, challenging himself to be the best he could be. To this end, he was often concerned with learning new skills, different and unique ways to help the team. And this is very important because it keys us into how he thinks. He learned these things partly because it would be beneficial for Karasuno, and partly because it's fun. And if we look back to his past, we can see where this stream of consciousness, try new things, free spirit attitude of his came from. When Noya was a kid, he was a self-proclaimed scaredy cat, afraid of everything. He always ran away and never really looked for exciting adventures because it was frightening. But his grandpa said something to him one day that changed him forever. He asked if Noya knew what was so wrong about being scared of something. Noya responded that it was because it wasn't manly to be scared, and his grandpa said no and simply replied that it's a shame because it's such a huge waste. To not try out the many things that life has to offer and instead be scared and stay in your own bubble, it's a waste. It's best to go out of that bubble and experience these things. And if you need it, you can get help from those you trust and care about if you're still scared. This idea instilled something in him, to form connections with others, value them, and use them partly to experience the beauties of life. It completely turned everything about him on its head, and Noya became the adventurous, wild young man we now see. Why not try new things? Why not take up new challenges? Life is too short to be scared and confined and comfortable. This philosophy took hold of Nishinoya and formed both the person we see in the story and the person we see post-time skip. Taking this into consideration, it really is no wonder that he ended up traveling the world.
相変わらず嵐のようだな。やかましいだろう。でもプレーはびっくりするくらい。静か。
The juxtaposition that helps define Nishinoya described by Daichi here was said mostly in reference to his playstyle, but I personally think that there's a bit more to this, given what we learn. While his wild side and his quiet side may seem incongruous, I think they work in seamless harmony for him as a person, even outside of volleyball. His wild nature consists of the things he longs to do and does. To experience victory with his brothers, to do all sorts of crazy things from moment to moment, to have fun, to explore the world. And the quiet is the peace he feels doing those things, knowing that he isn't wasting his time, as his grandpa would put it. He yearns to simply do what his heart desires, always looking for the next horizon, for somewhere new to experience and take in. Because that's what freedom is to him.
西野屋さ、わざわざ苦手なオーバーやんなくてもアンダーでさばけないこともないんじゃないの？
俺もアンダーで全部取れるならそれでいいと思ったし、できると思ってたんだよ。でももっと上がいる。選択肢が増えるって分かっててやんないなんてつまんねえよ。
So with all this in mind, how could Nishinoya ever settle for being on a team for an extended period of time as his career? To put it another way, how could he ever decide on one solitary thing to do for the foreseeable future? He simply can't be restricted in that way. So instead, he spreads his wings and searches for things beyond, as he always has. Volleyball was just a step and a journey in the beautiful path that is his life. He loved being the defensive cornerstone of the team, and he loved his teammates even more. And that is primarily why he played, to see the peak, not only for himself, but to experience it with them. To find people to help him when he was scared, and to help them in return as best as he could. While everyone on Karasuno supports one another, Nishinoya just always seems to be an extra bit more into celebrating with his teammates, enjoying the moment, living in the now, and helping them achieve their goals along with himself. He had no ambitions to take on the world or become the best or anything like that. He just wanted the experience. I think on a subconscious level, Noya was always acutely aware that his time in sport would be fleeting, and that's why he took full advantage of it. As a person of extremes, he either wanted to make it the time of his life, or not partake at all if he couldn't do it the way he wanted. He would seem like the textbook definition of a volleyball idiot, one so naturally adept at the game, and one who supplements that ability with tons of hard work and dedication. But I'm of the opinion that he always knew that this wouldn't be his long-term path. Everyone seeks their own methods of flying in the series. For Hinata and Kageyama, it involves staying on the court the longest and pursuing the highest of heights. But the beautiful twist to this is that their freedom would have been Noya's cage. Everyone is different. Every character wanted to spread their wings, but had different paths towards learning how to do so. And as for Nishinoya, he could simply never be confined to the court. But that sure as hell doesn't mean that he wasn't dedicated during the time he spent there.
カラスノには俺ありっすから。でも俺にもできないことがある。だから無理を承知で言います。太ももがはち切れようとも空中戦は頼みます。おい!
It's almost as if his main purpose for playing was imbuing Karasuno with such confidence. He definitely enjoys the sport to a huge degree, but victory or personal achievement or simply playing just aren't the main draw for him as much as experiencing all of these things with his teammates and helping them reach their ultimate dreams so that he can share the moments with them. This is what his focus was in high school. This camaraderie, working hard to have the most fulfillment with volleyball for him and those he cared about. And once volleyball was done, it was time to move on to something new. He is always looking to experience something awesome in the moment, and in the final arc, he just happens to be fishing in Italy. There's just something exceptionally beautiful about that endless freedom. This is a big part of what made me realize that Haikyuu isn't a story about volleyball, as much as it is about seeking those higher planes, being on the court not necessarily literally, but metaphorically, searching to find the things that we enjoy doing most, and finding solace and peace in that. For many, that means playing volleyball for a living like the monsters they are. For some, that just isn't the case, and that's okay. I find it funny that two of the characters who most succinctly encapsulate one of the primary ideals of Haikyuu, Noya and Kita, who we may look at in the future, were miles and miles away from the primary story of those on the court in the final arc. Volleyball contributed so much to everyone's lives, but it naturally isn't going to be the be-all and end-all for all of them, even for someone who seems to be born for it. There's a gorgeous value in the simple joys of living and connecting, and those joys can be found in and outside of sport. Nishinoya is a prime example of this, and I was blind to this fact until Furudate spelled it all out for us at the end. He's an embodiment of liberation, free spirit, and taking flight. From his turning point as a child on, he was never afraid to take his own path, regardless of what anyone thought, and I can't begin to express how admirable that is. But that's Yu Nishinoya. A simultaneously boisterous and quiet soul, larger than life itself. And try as you might, it is impossible to keep him bound. Many thanks for watching.